In the vast emptiness of space, where stars burned like distant candles and planets floated silently in their orbits, there was a single human ship. It wasn't large, nor was it particularly flashy. The USS Vanguard was an older model, patched together after years of service. But it carried something far more important than its size or speed. It carried hope. Humanity's survival rested on this one vessel as it sped toward a battle that seemed impossible to win. Captain Ryan Carter stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the railing tightly. His face was calm, but his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. He had seen battles before, fought against enemies both human and alien, but nothing compared to what they were about to face. On the main screen in front of him, a holographic map displayed the enemy fleet, a sea of red dots surrounding a small blue circle that represented Epsilon 7, a human colony under attack. There were hundreds of ships. Hundreds. And the Vanguard was alone. Ryan turned to look at Lieutenant Olivia Grayson, his second in command. She stood beside him, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the same map. Her expression was tense, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't need to say anything for Ryan to know what she was thinking. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Any logical person would call this mission suicide. But Ryan knew better than anyone that sometimes logic didn't matter. Sometimes you just had to fight. "We're outnumbered 10-1, Olivia finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was no hiding the concern behind her words. Ryan nodded slowly. "Yes, we are." He paused, letting the weight of her statement sink in. Then he added, "But numbers don't always decide a battle." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "They usually do." "Not this time," Ryan replied firmly. He stepped closer to the map, studying the positions of the enemy ships. "We've got something they don't, something they'll never understand." "And what's that?" Olivia asked. "Humanity," Ryan said simply. "Courage, determination. We don't back down, even when the odds are stacked against us. That's our advantage." Olivia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced around the bridge at the rest of the crew. Everyone was busy with their tasks, trying to prepare the ship for the inevitable confrontation. Chief Engineer Daniel Hayes was hunched over a console near the back of the room, muttering instructions to his team as they worked on repairing some damaged systems. Communications Officer Lisa Bennett sat at her station, headphones covering her ears as she listened intently to faint signals coming from deep space. Even gunner's mate Jacob Reed, who rarely spoke unless absolutely necessary, was focused on checking the weapon systems, ensuring everything was ready for combat. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of unity among the crew. Each person knew their role, and each person understood the stakes. If they failed, not only would Epsilon 7 fall, but humanity itself might be pushed to the brink of extinction. This wasn't just another mission. It was a last stand. Ryan walked over to Daniel, who was now standing upright, wiping sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of his uniform. "How's it going down here?" Ryan asked. Daniel looked up, his face flushed from exertion. "We're making progress, Captain. Most of the critical systems are online, but I'm still worried about the engines. If we take too much damage during the fight, we might not be able to escape afterward." Ryan nodded. "Understood. Do what?" "You can, but prioritize the weapons and shields. We'll worry about escaping once we've dealt with the Kryn." "Yes, sir," Daniel replied, turning back to his work. Next, Ryan approached Lisa, who was furiously typing on her keyboard. "Anything new?" he asked. Lisa shook her head without looking up. "Nothing concrete yet. I've picked up fragments of transmissions, but the encryption is unlike anything I've seen before. It's strange, almost like they're speaking in patterns rather than words." "Any idea what they're planning?" Ryan pressed. Lisa hesitated, then sighed. "From what I can gather, they're not interested in negotiations. Their language is aggressive, almost primal. I think they're here to wipe us out completely." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made the situation feel even more dire. "Keep working on it," he told Lisa. Every piece of information helps. Finally, Ryan made his way to Jacob, who was inspecting one of the turrets mounted along the side of the ship. Jacob looked up as Ryan approached, giving him a quick nod. "Everything good?" Ryan asked. "As good as it can be," Jacob answered, gruffly. "The turrets are loaded and ready. We'll give them hell when the time comes." Ryan smiled faintly. "That's what I like to hear." As Ryan returned to the center of the bridge, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. He trusted his crew. They were the best of the best, but trust alone wouldn't be enough to overcome the overwhelming force waiting for them. Still, he reminded himself of what he had told Olivia earlier. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its numbers. It was its spirit. Its refusal to give up, no matter how bleak things seemed. The Vanguard continued its journey through the cold void of space, drawing closer to the battlefield with every passing second. Ryan stared out the viewport, watching as the stars streaked by in long lines of light. Somewhere out there beyond the horizon, the Kryn awaited. They were ruthless, merciless, and determined to destroy everything humanity had built. But so were the humans aboard the Vanguard. The USS Vanguard drifted silently through the endless expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it approached the edge of the conflict zone. The crew moved about their tasks with a mix of urgency and quiet determination. Each person knew that the next few hours could decide the fate of humanity, and yet there was an unspoken understanding among them. They would face whatever came next together. Captain Ryan Carter stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the main screen. It displayed a live feed from the ship's long-range sensors, showing the growing blip of activity ahead. The Kryn fleet loomed like a storm cloud, dark and menacing. Even from this distance, the sheer size of their armada was staggering. Ships, of all shapes and sizes, clustered around Epsilon 7, surrounding it like predators circling wounded prey. Ryan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. This wasn't just another skirmish or border dispute. This was survival. If they failed here, if the Kryn succeeded in wiping out Epsilon 7, it would only be a matter of time before they turned their attention to Earth itself. Humanity's future depended on what happened next. "Captain," Lieutenant Olivia Grayson called out, breaking the silence. "We're within range of their outer perimeter. Should we slow down?" Ryan shook his head. "No. Keep us moving. At full speed for now. I want to get as close as possible without tipping them off." Olivia nodded and relayed the order to navigation. She glanced at Ryan, her brow furrowed. "Do you think they know we're coming?" "They'll find out soon enough," Ryan replied grimly. "But until then, let's use the element of surprise while we can." Down in the engineering bay, Chief Engineer Daniel Hayes was hard at work. His team scrambled around him, tools clinking and sparks flying as they fine-tuned the ship's experimental weapon system, Project Eclipse. It was a risky gamble, using technology that hadn't been fully tested, but they didn't have a choice. Conventional weapons wouldn't stand a chance against the Kryn's advanced shields and firepower. If the Vanguard had any hope of surviving, much less winning, Project Eclipse needed to work. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and leaned over a console, checking the system's status. Numbers and graphs scrolled across the screen, showing energy, levels, and calibration data. Everything seemed to be functioning properly, but he couldn't shake the nagging doubt in the back of his mind. What if something went wrong? What if the system overloaded during the battle? He pushed those thoughts aside. There was no room for hesitation now. "Chief," one of his assistants shouted, snapping him out of his thoughts. "We've got a problem with the power couplings. They're overheating." Daniel cursed under his breath and hurried over to inspect the issue. Sure enough, several panels were glowing red, indicating dangerously high temperatures. He grabbed a tool and began working quickly, muttering instructions to his team. "Coolant lines are blocked. Get me a bypass rerouted to auxiliary channels. And someone grab a thermal regulator. We need to stabilize these readings before they blow." As the engineers worked frantically, Daniel glanced up at the clock on the wall. Time was running out. Every second counted, and every delay brought the Kryn closer to discovering their presence. He gritted his teeth and focused on the task at hand. Failure wasn't an option. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Communications Officer Lisa Bennett sat hunched over her station, headphones pressed firmly against her ears. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she sifted through streams of intercepted signals. The Kryn language was unlike anything she'd encountered before, a strange combination of clicks, whistles, and rhythmic pulses. At first, it had seemed impossible to decipher, but after hours of analysis she was starting to notice patterns that hinted at their intentions. Lisa leaned back in her chair, her heart sinking. From what she could piece together, the Kryn weren't planning to negotiate or establish communication. Their transmissions carried orders for total annihilation, burning colonies to ash, eradicating every trace of human life. It was clear now. This wasn't a war for resources or territory. This was extermination. She removed her headphones and turned to Ryan. "Captain, I've managed to decode fragments of their communications." Ryan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "And?" Lisa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "They're not here to talk. They're planning to wipe us out completely. No survivors." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Everyone stopped what they were doing, the weight of Lisa's words settling over them like a suffocating blanket. Ryan clenched his jaw, his knuckles white as he gripped the railing. "Thank you, Lisa," he said quietly. "Keep monitoring. Let me know if anything changes." Lisa nodded and returned to her station, though her hands trembled slightly as she put the headphones back on. She hated being the bearer of bad news, but someone had to do it. Someone had to remind them all of what was at stake. As the Vanguard drew nearer to the battlefield, tension mounted aboard the ship. Gunner's mate Jacob Reed paced anxiously near the weapon controls, his muscles tense and coiled like a spring ready to snap. He had spent years honing his skills, training for moments like this, but nothing could truly prepare him for the reality of facing an enemy so vast and powerful. Still, he refused to let fear take hold. Fear was a luxury they couldn't afford. Jacob checked the turrets one last time, ensuring each cannon was loaded and primed. Then he turned to his assistant, a young recruit named Emily, who watched him with wide eyes. "You ready for this?" he asked gruffly. Emily swallowed hard but nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good," Jacob said. "Stick close to me and follow my lead. We'll get through this." Back on the bridge, Ryan stared out the viewport, his mind racing. He knew the odds were stacked against them. He knew the risks. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. Surrender was not an option. Not today. Not ever. The Vanguard crossed into the final stretch of space separating them from the Kryn fleet. The enemy ships grew larger on the screen, their metallic hulls glinting ominously in the light of distant stars. Ryan straightened his posture, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "All hands, prepare for combat. This is it." The crew sprang into action, each person falling into their role with practiced precision. Weapons systems powered up, shields reinforced, engines adjusted for maximum maneuverability. The hum of activity filled the ship, a symphony of preparation and resolve. Ryan took one last look at his crew, pride swelling in his chest despite the dire circumstances. These men and women were more than just soldiers. They were family. Together, they had weathered countless storms, faced unimaginable challenges, and emerged stronger because of it. Whatever happened next, they would face it head-on. The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it entered the fray. Ahead, the Kryn fleet loomed larger than life, a tidal wave of destruction threatening to engulf everything in its path. But the humans aboard the lone ship refused to falter. They had come too far, fought too hard to give up now. For humanity, there was no turning back. The USS Vanguard emerged from the shadow of a distant asteroid field, its sleek form glinting faintly in the dim light of a nearby star. The crew held their breath as the massive Kryn fleet came fully into view. It was worse than they had imagined. Hundreds of ships, some small and agile, others colossal and bristling with weapons, swarmed around Epsilon 7 like insects guarding a hive. The colony's orbital defenses were already crumbling under the relentless assault, explosions lighting up the planet's atmosphere in flashes of orange and red. Captain Ryan Carter stood rigid on the bridge, his eyes locked onto the main screen. His jaw tightened as he watched the destruction unfold. "Steady," he murmured more to himself than to anyone else. "Stay calm." Lieutenant Olivia Grayson adjusted the ship's trajectory, bringing them closer to the edge of the battlefield. "We're within firing range now, Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "What are your orders?" Ryan hesitated for a moment, weighing their options. Attacking head-on would be suicide. They needed to pick their battles carefully, strike where it hurt most, and retreat before the Kryn could overwhelm them. "Hold. Position for now," he instructed. "Let's see how they react when they spot us." As if on cue, alarms blared across the bridge. Lisa Bennett, the communications officer, looked up sharply. "They've detected us, Captain. Multiple contacts turning our way." "Here we go," Ryan muttered. He turned to Jacob Reed, who manned the weapon controls. "Jacob, prepare the cue. Turrets, target the closest fighters first. We need to thin their numbers before they surround us." Jacob nodded, his hands moving swiftly over the console. "Turrets online and ready, sir." Chief Engineer Daniel Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, Project Eclipse is still warming up. We're at 60% capacity and climbing. If we use it too soon, we risk burning out the system." Ryan clenched his fist but kept his tone level. "Understood, Daniel. Keep me updated. For now, we rely on conventional weapons." The first wave of Kryn fighters surged toward the vanguard, their sleek designs cutting through space like knives. The enemy ships opened fire immediately, energy beams slicing through the void. The vanguard shuddered violently as the shields absorbed the impacts, warning lights flashing across the bridge. "Shields holding at 85%, Olivia reported, her fingers flying over her console. "But we can't take much more of this." "Return fire," Ryan barked. Jacob didn't hesitate. With a fierce determination etched on his face, he unleashed a barrage of plasma rounds from the ship's turrets. The shots streaked through space, striking several of the incoming fighters. One exploded in a brilliant burst of light, debris scattering in all directions. Another spiraled out of control, crashing into one of its allies. "Yes!" Jacob shouted, pumping his fist. "That's how we do it." But the victory was short-lived. More Kryn ships poured in, their sheer numbers overwhelming. Explosions rocked the vanguard as the enemy intensified their assault. Panels sparked on the bridge, and smoke began to fill the air. Crew members scrambled to contain the damage, shouting instructions back and forth. Lisa gripped her headset tightly, struggling to filter through the chaos of transmissions. "I'm picking up chatter from the Kryn command ships," she said urgently. "They're coordinating an attack. Pattern. Looks like they're trying to flank us." Ryan cursed under his breath. "Olivia, adjust course, keep us mobile. Don't let them pin us down." "Aye, Captain," Olivia replied, her hands dancing over the navigation controls. The vanguard banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a concentrated volley of enemy fire. The maneuver gave Jacob a clear shot at another cluster of fighters, which he obliterated with ruthless efficiency. Despite their efforts, the situation grew increasingly dire. The shields dropped to 50%, then 40%. Warning sirens wailed incessantly, drowning out the hum of the engines. Ryan gritted his teeth, his mind racing for a solution. They couldn't keep this up forever. "Daniel, status on Eclipse," he demanded. "It's at 75%, Captain." Daniel's voice came through loud and strained. "Still not ready for deployment." Ryan slammed his fist against the railing. "We don't have time to wait. Can you reroute auxiliary power, anything to speed it up?" "I'll try, but I can't promise anything," Daniel replied. "If I push too hard, we risk blowing the entire system." "Do it anyway," Ryan ordered. "We're running out of options." In the engineering bay, Daniel worked furiously, rerouting power lines and recalibrating systems. Sweat dripped from his brow as he fought to stabilize the volatile energy core. Around him, his team hustled to assist, their movements frantic yet precise. Time seemed to slow as the seconds ticked by, each one feeling heavier than the last. Back, on the bridge, the Vanguard continued its desperate dance with death. Jacob fired relentlessly, taking out enemy ships one after another, but for every kill, 2 more took their place. The Kryn were relentless, their attacks growing more coordinated and aggressive. The shields fell to 20%, then 10%. Sparks flew as panels overloaded, forcing crew members to dive for cover. "We're not going to make it," someone shouted, panic creeping into their voice. Ryan spun around, his expression fierce. "We don't give up. Not here. Not now. Everyone, stay focused." His words cut through the fear like a knife, grounding the crew in the moment. They weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for humanity. For Earth. For everyone back home counting on them to hold the line. Suddenly, Lisa's voice broke through the commotion. "Captain, I've intercepted something. New. The Kryn flagship. It's broadcasting a signal. I think it's their command center." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Location?" Lisa pulled up the data on her screen. "It's near the center of the formation, surrounded by escorts. If we can hit it, we might disrupt their chain of command," Ryan finished, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. "Olivia, plot a course straight for the flagship. Jacob, focus fire on any ships that get in our way." "But Captain, the shields." "Olivia," protested. "We don't have a choice," Ryan interrupted. "Trust me." The Vanguard surged forward, its battered hull groaning under the strain. Enemy fire rained down, but the crew held together, pushing the ship beyond its limits. Jacob unleashed hell on the approaching vessels, clearing a path toward the heart of the Kryn fleet. "Eclipse is at 90%. Daniel's voice rang out over the intercom. "Almost there." Ryan clenched his fists, his gaze fixed on the looming silhouette of the Kryn flagship. Just a little further, an explosion rocked the ship, sending everyone stumbling. Smoke filled the air and alarms screamed louder than ever. But amidst the chaos, Ryan stood tall, his resolve unshaken. "Hold the line," he growled. "We're almost there." The USS Vanguard hurtled through space, its battered frame trembling under the relentless assault of the Kryn fleet. Every second felt like an eternity as the crew fought to keep the ship intact. Captain Ryan Carter gripped the railing on the bridge, his knuckles white, his eyes locked onto the massive silhouette of the Kryn flagship growing larger on the main screen. It loomed ahead like a mountain of steel and death, surrounded by smaller escort ships that swarmed around it, like guards protecting their king. "Shields at 5%, Olivia Grayson shouted, her voice strained but steady. "If we take another direct hit, we're done for." Ryan didn't respond immediately. His mind raced, calculating every possible move. The plan was risky, reckless even, but they had no other choice. If they could reach the flagship and deploy Project Eclipse, they might stand a chance. But getting there alive was the hard part. "Jacob, focus fire on those escorts," Ryan ordered. "Clear a path straight to the flagship." "Aye, Captain," Jacob Reed replied, his hands moving furiously over the weapon controls. Plasma rounds erupted from the turrets, tearing through the enemy ships with devastating precision. One by one, the smaller vessels exploded into fiery clouds of debris, creating a temporary gap in the Kryn defenses. But the reprieve was short-lived. More ships poured in to replace the fallen ones, their weapons blazing. The Vanguard rocked violently as energy beams slammed into its weakened shields. Panels sparked across the bridge and smoke began to fill the air. Crew members scrambled to contain the damage, shouting instructions over the deafening roar of alarms. "Captain, we can't hold out much longer," Lisa Bennett called out, her voice tinged with desperation. She had been monitoring the Kryn, transmissions nonstop, piecing together fragments of their plans. "Their reinforcements are closing in. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they surround us completely." Ryan clenched his jaw. 2 minutes wasn't enough time. They needed more. "Daniel, status on Eclipse?" he demanded, his tone sharp. At 95%, Daniel Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom. Almost ready, but not quite there yet. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at the holographic map displaying the battlefield. The Kryn fleet was tightening its grip, forcing the Vanguard into a deadly trap. There was no way out unless they acted now. "Olivia, bring us closer to the flagship," Ryan said firmly. "We'll have to risk it." "But sir," Olivia started to protest, her face pale with worry. "No time for arguments," Ryan interrupted. "Do it." Olivia hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Her fingers flew over the navigation controls, steering the Vanguard toward the heart of the enemy formation. The ship groaned under the strain, its engines pushing beyond their limits. Warning lights flashed across the console, but she ignored them, focusing solely on the task at hand. As the Vanguard closed in on the flagship, the Kryn response grew even more ferocious. Energy beams crisscrossed the void, narrowly missing the human ship as it darted between explosions and debris. Jacob worked tirelessly, taking out as many enemy fighters as he could, but the sheer number of attackers made it nearly impossible to keep up. "We're not going to make it," someone yelled, panic creeping into their voice. Ryan turned to face the crew, his expression fierce. "Yes, we are. Stay focused. Stay alive. That's an order." His words seemed to reignite a spark of determination among the team. Despite the chaos and destruction surrounding them, they pressed on, each person giving everything they had to keep the ship and humanity's hope alive. Suddenly, Daniel's voice broke through the commotion. "Eclipse is online. Repeat. Eclipse. He is online!" Ryan's eyes widened. "Finally," he muttered under his breath. He tapped the intercom button. "Daniel, prepare to deploy Eclipse on my mark." "Acknowledged, Captain," Daniel replied. "Just say the word." Ryan turned back to the main screen, watching as the Kryn flagship grew larger with each passing second. The enemy escorts were still firing relentlessly, but the gap Jacob had created was just wide enough for the Vanguard to slip through. "Hold steady," Ryan commanded. "We're almost there." The ship shuddered violently as another blast struck the hull, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Someone cried out in pain, but Ryan didn't look away from the screen. He couldn't afford to. "Not now." "Lisa, how close are their reinforcements?" he asked. "They're almost here," Lisa replied, her voice shaking. 30 seconds. Tops. Ryan's mind raced. 30 seconds wasn't enough time to fully execute the plan, but they didn't need perfection. They needed survival. And sometimes, survival meant making sacrifices. "Jacob, target the flagship's engines," Ryan ordered. "Disable their mobility. We'll use that moment to strike." "Aye, Captain," Jacob said, adjusting the turrets. A barrage of plasma rounds streaked toward the flagship, striking its massive engines. One of them erupted in a burst of flame, causing the ship to list slightly to one side. "Got it," Jacob exclaimed. "Their movement is impaired." "Good work," Ryan said, a hint of pride in his voice. He turned to Olivia. "Bring us in closer. Position us directly above their command center." Olivia nodded, her hands steady despite the tension coursing through her body. The Vanguard maneuvered into position, hovering dangerously close to the flagship's upper deck. Below them, the Kryn reinforcements arrived, flooding the area with even more ships. "We're surrounded," Lisa shouted, her voice rising in panic. Ryan ignored her. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. "Daniel, deploy Eclipse. Now." "Deploying Eclipse," Daniel confirmed. In the engineering bay, he activated the system, unleashing a surge of energy that coursed through the ship. Outside, a blinding beam of light erupted from the Vanguard, slicing through the flagship's hull like a knife through paper. The Kryn vessel shuddered violently, its systems failing as the beam carved a path of destruction through its core. On the bridge, the crew watched in awe as the flagship began to collapse in on itself. Explosions rippled across its surface, sending shockwaves through the surrounding ships. The Kryn fleet faltered, caught off guard by the sudden devastation. "Direct hit," Jacob yelled, triumph in his voice. Their command center is gone. Ryan allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before snapping back to reality. Don't celebrate yet. We're not out of this. The Vanguard pulled away from the wreckage, its engines screaming as Olivia guided the ship toward open space. Behind them, the remnants of the Kryn fleet regrouped, their attacks growing more chaotic and disorganized without their flagship to coordinate them. Shields are down to 1%, Olivia reported. We need to get out of here now. Agreed, Ryan said. Set course for the nearest safe zone, maximum speed. As the Vanguard sped away from the battlefield, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had survived against all odds, delivering a crippling blow to the Kryn fleet. But Ryan knew better than anyone that the war was far from over. This victory was only the beginning. He turned to his crew, his voice filled with quiet resolve. Good work, everyone. You've earned your rest. But remember, we're not done fighting. Not yet. The Vanguard disappeared into the vastness of space, leaving behind a field of wreckage and the faint glimmer of hope for humanity's future. The USS Vanguard limped through space, its battered hull groaning under the strain of escaping the battlefield. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship operational, but the damage was extensive. Panels sparked and smoked throughout the vessel, and emergency lights flickered in the corridors. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of cautious relief among the survivors. They had done the impossible. They had struck a critical blow to the Kryn fleet. Captain Ryan Carter stood on the bridge, his face smeared with soot and his uniform torn in places. He stared at the main screen, which now displayed only the endless void of space behind them. The Kryn reinforcements had not pursued, likely thrown into disarray by the destruction of their flagship. For now, they were safe. But Ryan knew this respite wouldn't last long. The Kryn would regroup, and when they did, humanity would face an even greater threat. Damage report, Ryan said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. Lieutenant Olivia Grayson glanced up from her console. Shields are completely gone, Captain. Hull integrity is at 40%. Engines are running at minimal capacity and we've lost 2 turrets. Life support systems are holding, for now, but Chief Hayes says we're pushing the limits of what the ship can handle. Ryan nodded grimly. Understood. What about casualties? Olivia hesitated before answering. 12 confirmed dead, including 3 engineers who were trapped in the lower decks during the attack. Another 20 are injured, some critically. Heavy silence fell over the bridge. Each loss weighed heavily on the crew, their faces etched with grief and fatigue. Ryan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay focused. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, survival was their priority. Lisa, any word from Earth Command? Ryan asked, turning to Communications Officer Lisa Bennett. Lisa shook her head, adjusting her headset. Nothing yet, Captain. Our comms array took heavy damage during the fight. I'm working on repairing it, but it'll take time. Ryan sighed. Without communication, they were cut off from reinforcements or updates about the Kryn's next move. For all they knew, another fleet could already be en route to finish what the first had started. Keep trying, he instructed. We need to re-establish contact as soon as possible. Yes, sir, Lisa replied, returning to her work. Down in the engineering bay, Chief Engineer Daniel Hayes was leading a frantic effort to stabilize the ship's systems. His team moved quickly, patching leaks, rerouting power, and welding damaged panels back together. Sweat dripped from Daniel's forehead as he shouted instructions, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting over the noise of machinery and alarms. How's Eclipse holding up? Ryan's voice crackled over the intercom. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and leaned closer to the mic. It's stable for now, Captain, but it's drained most of our reserves. If we try to use it again anytime soon, we risk blowing out the entire system and probably the ship along with it. Ryan frowned. Project Eclipse had been their ace in the hole, the weapon that turned the tide of battle. Without it, they were vulnerable. Do whatever you can to get it operational again, he ordered. We may need it sooner than we think. I'll do my best, Captain, Daniel replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't optimistic. He turned back to his team, barking orders to prioritize life support and engine repairs. The Vanguard couldn't afford to lose either if they hoped to make it back to friendly territory. Meanwhile, gunner's mate Jacob Reed wandered through the corridors, checking on wounded crew members and offering words of encouragement where he could. He wasn't used to such quiet moments. His role usually involved action and adrenaline. But now, surrounded by the aftermath of battle, he felt a deep sense of unease. The cost of their victory was written in every burnt-out panel, every empty bunk, every tear-streaked face. He stopped outside the medical bay, watching as medics worked tirelessly to save those who had been hurt in the fight. Emily, the young recruit who had assisted him earlier, lay unconscious on a cot, her arm bandaged and her breathing shallow. Jacob clenched his fists, guilt gnawing at him. She had followed his lead, trusted him to keep her safe, and now she was paying the price. One of the medics noticed him lingering in the doorway. "She'll pull through," the medic assured him, "but she needs rest." Jacob nodded stiffly. "Let me know when she wakes up." Back on the bridge, Ryan gathered his senior staff for a quick debrief. The mood was somber as they discussed their options. With limited resources and no way to call for help, their choices were slim. Returning to Earth was out of the question. The journey would take weeks, and the Vanguard might not survive that long. Staying put was equally risky. The Kryn could return at any moment. "There has to be somewhere nearby we can hide," Olivia suggested. "Somewhere they won't find us while we repair the ship." Ryan considered this. "What about Epsilon 7? Can we reach the colony?" Lisa shook her head. "Too dangerous. Even if the colony survived the initial attack, the Kryn will have left automated defenses behind. We'd be walking into a trap." "What about the moon?" Jacob offered. "Its shadow could mask our presence, and we might be able to scavenge materials to fix the ship." Ryan's eyes lit up. It was a risky plan, but it was better than nothing. "Good thinking, Jacob. Olivia, plot a course for the moon. Let's see if we can use it to our advantage." "Aye, Captain," Olivia replied, already adjusting the navigation controls. As the Vanguard changed course, heading toward the dark side of Epsilon 7's moon, the crew prepared for what came next. Daniel and his team worked double time to reinforce the ship's structural integrity, knowing they'd need every advantage they could get. Lisa continued her efforts to repair the communications array, determined to reach Earth Command before it was too late. Ryan stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The weight of leadership pressed down on him heavier than ever. He had made decisions today that cost lives. Good people who believed in him, who trusted him to bring them home. And yet here they were, still fighting, still standing. Humanity's resilience was both its greatest strength and its heaviest burden. "We'll make it," he whispered to himself, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. "We have to." The Vanguard slipped into the shadow of the moon, disappearing from sight. For the first time in hours, the crew allowed themselves a brief moment of calm. Repairs continued, plans were refined, and hope, fragile but stubborn, remained alive. Ryan returned to the bridge, taking his place at the center. "All right, everyone," he said, addressing the crew. "This isn't over, not by a long shot, but we've proven something today. We're stronger than they thought, smarter, more determined. No matter what happens next, remember this: we're still here. And we're not going down without a fight." His words resonated through the room, reigniting the spark of defiance that had carried them this far. The Kryn had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make the same mistake twice.